Welcome to The Explainer. So let's jump right in, shall we? When we think about global superpowers, our minds usually jump straight to military might, or technological races, or maybe high-stakes diplomatic summits. But today, we're going to look at a completely different kind of chessboard. We're going to see how physical port infrastructure, the concrete docks, the massive cranes, the deep water channels, has quietly become the ultimate chess piece for global influence. Today, we're exploring exactly why China is buying up ports all around the world and how this strategy is completely reshaping modern maritime geopolitics.
To really understand the stakes here, you only need to hear one massive number: 80%. That is the proportion of all international merchandise trade that actually moves by sea. Think about that for a second. From the smartphone in your pocket to the clothes on your back to the raw energy that's powering your city right now, the vast majority of our global economy relies on ships safely and efficiently crossing the oceans. We're talking about over 12 billion tons of cargo moved annually. So it stands to reason that if you control the nodes where these ships have to stop, you basically have your hand right on the valve of global trade. And the sheer density of ports clustered across Asia tells a pretty staggering story about where that trade is happening. The Asia-Pacific region alone discharges 47% of the total global volume of seaborne trade. It is the absolute epicenter of this activity, controlling half of the world's port capacity and handling a whopping 2/3 of global container throughput. We are witnessing a monumental shift where the economic center of gravity has firmly and undeniably relocated to Asian waters. So here's our roadmap for how we're going to break this all down today. 1. The pivot of global trade. 2. Mastering domestic port efficiency. 3. Expanding the global network. 4. Navigating geopolitical choke points. And finally, number 5. The future of maritime power.
All right, part 1, the pivot of global trade. Let's start by looking at the physical hardware that makes all of this possible. Because to control the seas, well, you first need the ships.
Get this. In 2024, an absolutely mind-blowing 98% of the world's large merchant ships were built in Asia. The absolute lion's share of this comes from just 3 nations: China, South Korea, and Japan. So not only is the Asia-Pacific region the busiest destination for cargo in the world, but they also have a near total monopoly on manufacturing the very vessels that actually carry it. This right here is the fundamental hardware foundation of maritime power. Moving into part 2, mastering domestic port efficiency. Because having the ships is really only half the battle, right? You have to be able to load and unload them incredibly fast. According to the 2025 Container Port Performance Index published by the World Bank, Chinese ports are currently occupying 4 of the top 5 spots globally. Fuzhou is number 1, Dalian is number 2, with Mawan and Chiwan taking 4th and 5th. For international shipping lines, every single hour a vessel sits idle costs them thousands of dollars. By completely dominating these efficiency rankings, China has built a domestic maritime environment that is just incredibly attractive and, frankly, indispensable to global commerce. So you might be wondering, how exactly are they pulling this off? Well, the World Bank analysis points to a brilliant structural secret. It's China's export-driven economic model. Think about it. In ports that mostly import goods, terminal yards get highly congested just waiting for local trucks to arrive and pick things up. But China is primarily loading outbound cargo. This means terminal operators can pre-stage and meticulously sequence all those containers in the yards long before a ship even crosses the port boundary. It maximizes crane productivity and drastically cuts down on vessel turnaround times. And what's wild is just how resilient they are. Take Fuzhou, the number 1 port in the world right now. Back in 2020, they held a really strong score of 118, which totally collapsed down to 27 during the 2021 global supply chain crisis. But look at that bounce back. By 2025, they surged to a score of 144.6. How did they do it? Through aggressive operational changes and just massive infrastructure investments. They actually completed a new 200,000 deadweight ton terminal that vastly expanded their capacity. When there's a bottleneck, they literally just invest their way out of it. Okay, part 3, expanding the global network. Having perfected this highly efficient model at home, China definitely isn't keeping the secret to themselves. State-owned operators are the vanguard of an incredibly aggressive expansion to export all this expertise. Just look at these footprints. China Merchants Ports, or seaports, now operates a portfolio spanning 46 ports across 26 different countries. COSCO Shipping Ports sits securely as the 3rd largest operator globally, managing over 200 berths worldwide. And they aren't slowing down anytime soon. Their primary expansion targets are emerging markets in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. This vast, interconnected network is a core physical component of the Belt and Road Initiative, quite literally linking the globe back to Beijing. Now, analysts usually point to two main motivations driving this rapid expansion. On one side, you have supply chain security. China relies heavily on global trade, so buying ports essentially ensures their export lines remain open and their domestic economy keeps humming along. But on the other side, there's geopolitical influence, because owning critical infrastructure in a foreign nation, that inherently alters power dynamics, giving China strategic leverage in global affairs. But in reality, these acquisitions are brilliantly accomplishing both of those goals at the exact same time. Which brings us to part 4, navigating geopolitical choke points. This is a critical concept in maritime strategy, and it explains exactly why certain locations on the map are just so incredibly prized. Let's make sure we're on the same page with a clear definition here. A maritime choke point is a narrow, strategic route that provides passage from one major body of water to another. Because massive amounts of traffic are forced to funnel through these tight spaces, they are highly vulnerable to physical blockages, like a stuck ship, or to geopolitical leverage, like a hostile nation threatening to close the route entirely. A choke point isn't just a transit lane. It is a tool of immense global power. And for Beijing, this brings up a very real, very massive strategic vulnerability, famously known as the Malacca Dilemma. Roughly 80% of China's oil imports are routed through the Strait of Malacca, which is this narrow passage squeezed between Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. If this strait were ever closed off due to a conflict or crisis, the Chinese economy could face an immediate, catastrophic energy shortage. This genuine, pressing vulnerability is a primary driver behind China's urgent need to find alternative routes and heavily invest in global ports. Case in point, this proposed infrastructure project known as the Thailand Land Bridge across the Kra Isthmus. This project would literally connect the Indian and Pacific Oceans right through southern Thailand, completely bypassing the Malacca Strait. Naturally, this has drawn intense Chinese interest, as it aligns perfectly with the Belt and Road Initiative. But, as you'd expect, it also sparks a geopolitical tug-of-war with other major powers, like India and the US, who are watching these developments very, very closely. If you want to see what happens when a choke point actually fails, we just have to look at recent headlines. Look at the cascading effects of the Red Sea crisis. In late 2023, Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait basically forced major shipping lines to completely abandon the Suez Canal. Suddenly, they had to detour all the way around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. This massive disruption instantly triggered increased transit times, way higher shipping costs, and global inflationary pressures. It proves, without a doubt, that choke point security is everyone's problem. But these choke points aren't just vulnerable to armed conflict. They're major political battlegrounds too. Take the Panama Canal. In early 2025, tensions really flared when the United States applied pressure to remove a Chinese-linked operator, CK Hutchison, from running ports at both entrances to the canal. This diplomatic clash, which literally reached the UN Security Council, shows us that in the 21st century, controlling the ports around a choke point is just as critical and fiercely contested as controlling the water itself. Finally, part 5, the future of maritime power. So, where is all of this actually heading? Let's look at the shifting landscape of global maritime control and the massive deals defining our horizon. Keep your eyes on this mind-boggling number. $22.8 billion. That is the reported value of a monumental proposed deal regarding the sale of Hutchison Port Holdings. Basically, CK Hutchison has been in talks to sell a controlling stake in 43 global ports to a consortium led by BlackRock and MSC. But notably, reports indicate Beijing is actively pushing for COSCO, China's state-owned giant, to be included in this deal to safeguard Chinese interests. If this actually goes through, it would be the largest transaction in container port history, totally redrawing the map of global port ownership. Which leaves us with this final, pretty profound question to wrap up on. We so often think of global connectivity in terms of the digital internet. But shipping? Shipping is the physical internet of global trade. In a multipolar world where physical infrastructure, the docks, the cranes, the choke points, is the new battleground, who truly controls that physical internet? Because as we've seen today, whoever controls the ports shapes the future of the global economy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a totally new lens to view the world through.